Okay, gentlemen, here we are. I think we're live. I think we're getting ready to kick this thing off. Welcome to the centralization debate. Moshe and Mike, I really appreciate your time today. Thanks for working through some of those early technical glitches. We'll see if we can be a little bit more deliberate. I think Moshe has a slight delay, but it's not too bad. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. I want to.
Moshe, just like that, he threw you under the bus saying it's your technical problems. But wow, that's not fair. That's not fair.
I can take it. I process things slowly anyway, so I need to.
Yeah. Well, and Moshe and I are both Nuggets fans, so we're kind of banded together in that sense. Anyway, we're in mourning this week, so sorry about that, Moshe. All right, guys, thank you again. This is Transforming Cities live edition. If you want to learn more about Transforming Cities, please go to transformingcities.io. That's the website. You can subscribe, sign up there, follow along with all of our research-backed insights. We have a lot of guidance for boots on the ground, go to market guidance there. We have a really strong focus on getting better ROI and less risk out of your projects. So I really encourage you to take a look at the website now, get signed up. We're also on all of your major podcast platforms for the Apple listeners out there, Spotify and YouTube as well. This live is going to go out to all those platforms in just under a week. So if you missed this full episode or you want to share it with a colleague, please jump in and share it. This is kind of fun. This week, we're gonna let you guys win some stuff. So as people are joining, I'll remind everyone on the back end too. Sorry, Mike and Moshe, you're not allowed to participate in this one. You're already winners since you're on here with us. But what we're doing is we're giving away three $50 Amazon gift cards and a TC swag box to anyone who is willing to submit a survey to give us your feedback for Transforming Cities globally. We want to hear from you. We want to hear to make this platform better. So we're going to pick three winners at random. The survey closes tonight at midnight. Get your entries in. Follow the link in the comments. We're going to post it there. Excited to give out some free goodies.
Is that midnight Mountain Time?
That's midnight international dateline, so everyone should be able to get it in.
Nice.
All right, guys. Again, thanks for joining today. Today's live. We have Moshe Crane and Mike DeMella. So a lot of you probably know both of these great gentlemen. Moshe is the VP of Branding and Strategic Initiatives at Sage Ventures. Sage, if you don't know, is a Maryland-based real estate investment and management company specializing in multifamily acquisitions and development in the Baltimore-Washington corridor. Sage has a portfolio of 4,000 units under management and 1,000 plus homes developed today. You can learn more at sageventures.com. Mike is not too far down the road. Mike's a nationally recognized leader in the real estate space. He's been awarded as one of Boston's 40 under 40 professionals by the Boston Business Journal. He's the managing partner at Charles Gate, which is helping investors develop, go to market, and operate multifamily to generate market-beating returns. charlesgate.com is the URL there to learn more. So guys, thank you again. Centralization. Today I want to cover what is centralization. What do you guys both think that is and means? How does it tie into residents, employees, and properties? I think there's an interesting fold here about prop tech's role in centralization as we see it changing and evolving in recent years. I want to cover some cost effectiveness of centralization, if we can kind of dabble there, and some of the scalability questions that have come up, both I think amongst ourselves, but also some audience questions that have come in around that. And then with the remaining time at the end, anyone, it looks like we have a lot of listeners today, which is great. Any audience questions that come in, we'll try to field those as much as we can at the end as well. So guys, let's jump in. I want to start with this thread on LinkedIn that really led us to this conversation. And that was a post that Moshe made talking about this pathway of property managers, leasing to assistant property manager to property manager to regional property manager. And the quote was, I believe, without assistant property managers, how will companies hire property managers? Kind of working through this mindset and this thought process. Management companies, you noted, Moshe, are now removing that APM role. And you couldn't really see it. You didn't really think that that's necessarily going to work. You asked for a lot of opinions. I think that post got over 100, maybe 150 comments. Really interesting starting point for this conversation. Mike, I know you jumped in and immediately disagreed with that stance, and that kind of got us into this conversation, which I think is really great. As a grounding feature to this conversation, I want to allow both of you guys to answer. And Moshe, let's start with you. I think it's important to think about the best we can answering the question, what is centralization? You could tie it to residents, employees, properties, whatever you feel like fits the best. I think this concept means different things to different groups. So I'd love to hear you kick us off. What do you feel like the definition of centralization is today?
Honestly, I don't like the word centralization. I think that the concept to be a market leader, you got to be the best in one of three categories, and that's best product, customer intimacy, or operational efficiency. And when I learned about this concept, I asked myself, like, what should be our North Star? And we're typically buying properties. We do develop some, but we're typically buying properties. So I don't think best product should be our North Star, because we can't control. And even when we're developing, there's not a huge difference between, a property on our side of the street versus the other side of the street. In terms of customer service, that's very important. You can't stink at any of these. Residents are always going to move that are reasons beyond our control. They're buying a house, their job location, life events. So I really feel that our North Star should be operational efficiency. Centralization is whoever came up with that term, I think it's bad marketing, it's bad branding. And to me, the goal is operational efficiency. Centralization can be a tactic to achieve operational efficiency. And everybody's going to know two management companies are the same. So a lot of people like to look at the top 50 in MHC. Those companies are ranging from 800,000 units to 50,000 units, and what they're capable and the resources they have is very different than the majority of the market. The majority, I think, are mid-market companies like Sage, somewhere between 3,000 and 15 to 20,000 units. And so what we're able to do operationally is very different than with these larger companies. Now, my vantage point is my experience at Sage. Our smallest property is 300 units. Our biggest is 535. Companies that, if you're operating properties that are, under 200 units or even under 100 units in a property, your operations are going to look very different. So I don't want to give a definition to centralization. I think that the goal should be operational efficiency, and anything that you can do to be more efficient with your operations is generally a good thing. I know you're the moderator, but let's put the question back on Mike. Like, his comment on that post was, "I'm dead wrong." So, like, what am I dead wrong about?
Yeah, let's open it up. Mike, why don't you respond?
Would love to. And Chris, can you pop us into just seeing us instead of the slide as well?
Yes, sir.
It's hard to see. That'd be great. Yeah, so I'm going to start this debate with a big agreement with Moshe. I think the word centralization is a terrible word as well, and we like to think of it as functional specialization. And I agree with the premise also that yes, we're trying to operate properties in a way that is more efficient, but it's around, I think, a set of a few goals. One of those is resident experience. One of those is the employee experience. And one of those is just the outcomes of the property. So financial NOI benefits and long-term value expansion and risk mitigation, right? So when we think about this, we think the best way to operate properties is by having a level of functional specialization. So I think the post, when Moshe wrote in his post that there's this organic or natural career trajectory that always starts with a person starting in the business and leasing, then moving to an assistant property manager, then a community manager, then a regional manager. That's where the real disagreement is. Because I think how properties are best served to drive outcomes around resident experience, around the property valuation outcomes, and frankly, employee experience are not served well that way. So how they are well served is really creating functional specialization. So leasing, for example, and sort of quote unquote centralizing leasing and taking that away from a property specific function can lead to far better leasing outcomes, better careers for people who are interested in sales, let's say as a leasing person and not someone who's interested in going up a property management career trajectory. and then you have a separate career trajectory or separate functions for other things as well. We could talk about that, but certainly I think there's a difference between the operational management of a property and the functions required for that, sort of budgeting, strategic planning, thinking, looking at the market and rents, and then the resident services part of the job as well. And I think those roles should be carved out and people should be put in those right seats who are better in those various types of roles. So the type of person who you want in that kind of business planning, strategic thinking, operational leader role is different than the one most likely who's going to be in a resident services role, really catering to delivering a perfect resident experience. Now, how much of that can be quote unquote centralized at a main office or a portfolio kind of wide coverage location versus on site at a property, I think very much depends on the size of the property, what the makeup of the portfolio is, and all those things that Moshe mentioned that come into play in terms of how you structure that. And so that's why I also hate the word centralization. It has just happened to become the buzzword in the industry. But I think it's more about functional specialization more than anything else. And it doesn't sort of in the natural progression of, leasing, assistant property manager, et cetera, just is not working well for employees or the outcomes of the properties as much as maybe it has in the past.
Moshe, what do you think about that? How do you respond to that viewpoint?
Well, my question, where's the viewpoint coming from? So when you say it's not working, is this based on data that you read? Is this based on what's happening at your company? Where's it coming from? Because, it's working really well at our company. When I became the director of leasing and marketing, and I got involved in the hiring process, I had to create a philosophy. My philosophy was that if we created a greater runway for employees, there was a greater chance that they would stick around longer. So I created a training for leasing, and I started hiring folks who had no experience. So they were happy to come in at the lower end of our pay scale of our range. And so my thought process is, if I hire someone who has 4 years of leasing experience and they're coming in at the high point of our pay range, within a year, they're going to want to be promoted. They're going to want to raise. They're going to want something. And there's less flexibility for that organic growth to happen. So I like to think in bets, right? If I'm going to bet on a situation working, I think if there's a higher probability of bringing in someone who has no experience, I could train them, and there's a bigger runway. So if they're coming in at a lower pay rate, that by 9 months, I can give them an increase that works for us, that they're very happy with. And the longer this person is going to stick around, the more opportunities there are going to be for them to move up into another position. So we've had a lot of organic growth. We have regional managers, property managers that started out as leasing specialists, or who started out as assistant managers, are now director of leasing, started out as a leasing. And people kind of knock our industry that we do this, leasing is a sales position, manager is not a sales position. But I don't have a list of them, but some of the biggest companies, their CEOs started out in the mailroom, or we've all heard those good stories of somebody, and these are different industries, all sorts of different industries, where somebody started in at the bottom and they've been at a company for a very long time and they moved up. So it's not a unique thing to our industry where people have this natural progression. And it also, when people are coming in, it gives them a trajectory for careers. When we hire people, it's not just giving them a job. I look at it as we're giving them a career. And sometimes at leasing, and when you're hiring people who don't have experience, there's a risk involved where maybe property management is not for them. It's not for everybody. And that happens. And that's a risk I'm willing to take. But when someone comes in and they're like, hey, I could really make a career here. And now we've given them a career and it can completely change their life. The person who's the director of leasing, young fellow, he never planned on sticking around very long, and we're just like that ugly girlfriend that he can't get rid of. He just likes it so much, and it's working out really well.
I think Moshe makes a good point there, Mike. How does that jive with your thinking on the employee side of quote unquote centralization?
Well, yeah, I think we're all interested, if we're trying to deliver a great employee experience, is creating career opportunities for growth, both at the starting point and into the business overall. So I'm not advocating for just having someone be in leasing and be a leasing specialist forever necessarily, right? But what we're saying is that there's a function of leasing that is not well served by having that be part of like an assistant property manager role that is meant to just be a regional manager. So what we've seen many times is properties operating in our market at like 91, 92% occupancy because they don't have specialization in the leasing roles. And part of that is marketing too, Chris, is much more related to you. But what we're seeing is properties performance suffering. That's sort of one of the first points Moshe asked for, is like, what is the evidence of that? And the evidence is we're seeing a very dramatic lack of focus and expertise in driving revenue, which is why you want to bring in leasing specialists, salespeople who are much better at converting interest and traffic into actual leases, right? And so that's the first part, which we've recognized as a major benefit to doing it this way. The second thing, to answer your question, Moshe, is a very good question, and it's a very important thing that we take into a careful consideration: is how do you create career pathways across any of the functions in your business? And I think you actually made my point for me, Moshe, when you said, it used to be someone in the mailroom has moved up to CEO, and there's anecdotal stories like that, and sure there are. But, if you look at it and say someone comes in to any business as an accountant level 1, and then you go to accountant level 2 and accountant level 3 and director of finance and CFO, and then maybe they come to CEO. So they can move up within their function until there's perhaps a combined function or oversight managerial position that oversees multiple functions, or ultimately the CEO of a business. So within our leasing team now, we've got, leasing specialists, we have leasing managers, we have director of leasing, and these people are moving up in that career pathway. It just so happens that we don't have them on site. It's a centralized function. So we don't have them at one property on site feeling like it's a stuck dead end leasing role for one property. They're serving multiple properties and they're able to move up. And we also compensate them differently. It's very much a sales position, and it's very much performance-based pay. So there's a little bit more upside and it's not an entry-level position for us. And I think those are some of the differences from the traditional way of operating in the business that, Moshe, perhaps you're seeing or operating under. And again, I also agree with you. There's not necessarily one way to do this. What works for one portfolio or one company is not going to work for all of them. And that's why, the buzzword centralization, everyone's trying to centralize, doesn't really mean anything at all. There's many different ways to do, both the traditional way of operating as well as what we like to think is this newer, more modern way that works certainly for us. And we've seen the performance across our portfolio and compared to the market in general.
Yeah, Moshe, have you seen it approached that way in
how many properties do you have in?
Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to
so we have about, we're about the same. We're about 4,000 units. And we typically, though, manage our portfolio is smaller, generally sort of 50 to 150 to 200 units is our typical portfolio here. So a lot of our learnings, frankly, does stem from the mid-size, kind of mid-market properties, which I think, though, has created and forced us to think about these in ways that is just drives more creativity and more nimbleness, so to speak, to how we're serving that portfolio versus the traditional way. And, we found that we can operate with this functional specialization. Again, you curate it, you craft it based on the type of property and the size of properties. It's different. It's not, again, this trap of falling into where you're just going to bring in the centralization is bringing in all your assistant property managers to the home office and everyone works for there. You still have your property managers on an island, and it's basically the same thing, and you're calling it centralization. That's not what I would ever advocate for, and that's not how we do it. It's really about this functional specialization and how the roles are. Some of them are on site, and some of them are more kind of centralized across a larger portfolio.
So if you would acquire or build a property that had 400 units, would you operate with the same model that you're using now for your properties that are 50 to 100 units?
Yeah, the same basic model. Yeah, absolutely. It's the same basic model with that specialization of functional roles, centralized, and very much centralizing leasing, but it's going to be a little bit different than 100 or 150 unit property is going to look, right? It's going to just be a different setup. You might need more of the roles that are required for a larger property, of course, and other things that would be handled on the back end. But there's ways of saying, the nice thing about the model is it's very scalable in terms of how you operate different sizes of property. So whereas on the smaller side, let's say 50 or 75 units, you can actually fractionalize the services in a way. So you still have this team of functional roles. So a portfolio lead, let's call it, who's responsible for that business role that I talked about, budgeting and strategic. You have a resident services manager who's responsible for the resident services. You have frankly, a centralized maintenance, centralized leasing that can work across a portfolio, and you're sort of fractionalizing. So you have the roles and the functions you need, but then you're shared across a couple of properties in that case for the smaller ones. The larger ones, you have a little bit less or none of the fractionalization. You add more people in the seats that you need for that size property. So it scales up and down really, really nicely. I mean, you have to sort of be creative about how the structure of the team is built for each property. And just one more thing to add, not to monopolize this, but the other thing is you can also scale it up or down based on the goals of a property. So if you have a higher end, higher market property that needs a higher level of service, again, you can put more people in the roles that you need to deliver a higher level of service. And if you have a property that needs sort of, call it more efficient on the cost side, you can level down that amount of staffing that you're committing to it. But still delivering the same amount of still delivering within the functional specialization. So you're getting the services and the tasks and the roles done as best as possible with that specialization.
Can you unpack that specialization a little bit? Like, so you said your leasing is not an entry level position, so you're hiring people who are coming from other sales positions.
They are often coming from other sales positions. They have some other real estate sales experience or real estate sort of sales background. They may have come from other sales positions at other companies for sure, possibly. I mean, we also we do bring in some that are new to sales, but they have the traits and skills that we think are best suited for a sales position, not necessarily a property manager type of role.
Okay. And so you're hiring those people, and then their specialization, their career with you is just within, I mean, I guess it could advance to a director of leasing or something like that. But
right.
Beyond that, is there any position for them within your organization? And it could be like, I got a friend, Jim Rostel, on the West Coast, his properties are on the smaller side, and he has leasing agents that just do the people side. They do the tours and the leasing part, and there's another team that is like the inside sales team, and they're all making good money, and they've been doing that for a long time. I think his situation is rather unique. I don't think that is something that necessarily applies to all management companies.
Yeah, right. And so I know his system, we've talked as well. I think they're actually a lot similar to how we operate, frankly, than not. So, but that's exactly right, though. You have people who are really good at what they do in roles that can, so our leasing team can go out and practice all the time. They can do training around how to do sales, but how to interact with customers for that first impression, or potential residents for that first impression to be as good as possible, which again is about two things. One, getting more people, converting more tours to residents, and then starting off their experience really, really excellently. And not to sidetrack this or get into like the prop tech set yet, but what we see also is a lot of buildings that have gone to this, trying to be efficient and centralized, and gone to like self-guided tours and all these other things that just really hamper the leasing and revenue opportunities for a property. So, side note, maybe later in the conversation, but having really professionally well-trained salespeople allows, again, better conversion to lease and a better experience for the residents. And so the first part of the question, though, is, where do they go from here? And again, they work up the career path in the leasing part of our team. And again, their opportunities are twofold: working on newer, bigger, better projects in the future. We do a lot of, lease ups as well, lease up work, marketing and sales on the lease up side, which is, partly why this also is attractive for us, in that we do a lot of new development work. So, which is maybe different from your type of typical project buying stabilized properties already. So there's a big difference there that probably provides a firm like us more opportunity for leasing to have a bigger, wider base of opportunity. But nonetheless, we still believe. Sorry, go ahead.
Leasing agents are going to be able to make more money with a lease up, because there's a lot of leasing to do. And then once you are leased up and it's stabilized, and there's a lot, like you said, their commission is heavily commission based. So if you have a stabilized asset, it's harder for them to make more money and stick within that model. But if your model is continuously doing lease up, so that makes sense, but then it's not necessarily applicable to those when you're talking about stabilized.
Yeah, well, yes and no, though, because there is more opportunity from that, sort of having a lot of lease ups and a lot of lease up functions. But even within the stabilized portfolio, they're working on multiple properties, not just one property, right? So they're getting more opportunities across a portfolio of properties in that centralized fashion rather than just being on one single site.
Guys, I think let me jump in here because I want to pivot to a different part of the term centralization, and it relates to some of the comments that we're getting, and it relates to an early audience question, and it has to do with not only the location but the different sizes of properties across the country. So when we're talking about centralization, does it work for all properties and sizes? I think you guys are starting to get into this a little bit. I think about remote portfolios or portfolios that are not down the street. One of the comments, Mike, that I think was a good one is that a lot of the Charles Gate properties are within a similar location or a general area. Moshe, that might not necessarily be the case for all of Sage's, portfolios, and certainly a lot of the viewers, all of their buildings aren't necessarily within, call it a 5 mile, 10 mile radius in one city. So, can property management companies implement centralization or this specialization at scale? Or does it matter what type of portfolio it is? Does it need to be local? Can it happen remote? I'm curious to get both of your takes. Moshe, let's start with you on that one.
Well, again, the idea is to be operationally efficient, and everybody right away goes to like a staffing model and leasing model. I mean, we never called it centralization, but there's many tasks that a lot of companies do on site that we took off site a long time ago. We do renewals at corporate. All the accounting is done at corporate. We don't do any of that on site. And there's, we have people who join our team and they're excited because they're like, whoa, this is a lot less work than I had to do at the last management company because corporate does all of this. So we've taken a lot of things off of the on-site team, and it has nothing to do with our leasing model or our staffing structure. It's just what's on their plate, what's not on their plate. And I had this thought, when I went out to lunch with my father and we're waiting there, and the person who's standing at the greeting desk answers the phone, and then when they're off the phone, then they sit us, and then they're back answering the phone, and then they're taking our order, and they're doing all these different functions, and it's like, this is not very efficient. What's important for that person to be doing? So it's the same thing here. Nobody needs their on-site staff to be managing packages, right? If we could take that off their plate, that would be amazing, right? It's not necessary. I mean, it is necessary because who else is going to do it at the moment? But that's not necessary in their function to operate the property, if that makes sense. So things that we can take off their plates. So this idea of having a place where, and a lot of folks, the way their centralization works is, they'll have a call center and it becomes a very bad experience, right? So if you're, like Michael's company is a local company, and if they have a group that's answering all the calls, they're very familiar with the properties, they're local, right? You call some of these larger REITs or these public companies, and it's worse than Verizon's customer service experience. So it depends. It's not just doing a function or a tactic and saying this is centralization and then say that this is better. It's sort of a case by case, but there's a lot of things that you can do even if you're not geographically close. I mean, all of our stuff is a driving distance. That's we're owner operators and we're very hands-on. But let's just take it to maintenance for a second. I'm the head of strategic initiatives, and so it used to be just focused on leasing and marketing. Now it's our whole operation, and so I would dive into expense numbers and maintenance things, and we're starting to create reports and tracking on that. And a quick win that we've had is we started to compare our expenses by category per unit across our portfolio. So many people will make a mistake and say, oh, this property is doing great because it's under budget. But that same expense, when you compare it on a per unit level, could be doing terrible versus a different property. So when we did that, like we're looking at all of our contracts and we're comparing it on a per unit price versus our full portfolio, there were certain things that started to stand out, and it led us to re-looking at some of our contracts, and we were able to renegotiate some of our contracts and save $20,000. That's just like a quick win. So it doesn't matter where you are geographically to be, centralizing your purchasing or centralizing your reporting on expenses and maintenance.
Yeah, and no, exactly right. I think that's why I hate the term as Moshe does, centralization, because that's not really what it's about, right? It's not this. I think there's this myth about everybody's working at a home office now, and you just put some virtual showings or a call center and you're done, right? So that's not the case at all. So I think this works very well and really in any scope, or can work very well in any scope of distance or sort of portfolio width and size. I mean, again, you're functional, or you're centralizing, or the functions that make sense to bring to a home office, or whatever it might be, a corporate offices in within a region. But you're still having to deliver the services that require on site. So I can give you another example, like just even think about maintenance, right? So maintenance, we also centralize in a lot of ways. And so they have them working within a portfolio of properties, but those portfolio properties they are within a specific region that a maintenance tech can service in a centralized fashion. So they're not, sitting around at one property waiting for a ticket to come in, and they're, say basically at half capacity in terms of utilization. So we can split them, but we're not saying, no, you can't have, if you got two properties that are 3 hours apart, that makes no sense. You have to have some sort of concentration to do that type of centralization, but it's not necessarily at the home office all the way. We can do it in a way that fractionalizes that service within a geographic area that works. Our portfolio is spread sort of throughout, I would say, Eastern New England. Now, in East New England is obviously a smaller region, so we've got it's all within a sort of a couple of hours drive at the most. So yeah, does that make it easier? Perhaps, but I think it's any big company and big portfolio can do this. There just needs to be a little bit of regionalization type of setup within that to make it work. And again, the main point though is not necessarily the centralization. It's about functional specialization and driving that efficiency for wherever it's best and most capably done, to what Moshe says. So that's what I totally agree. But I think I don't have any doubt in my mind that it works and can work for us as we continue our expansion as well, and for other companies as well that want to try to build in more of this functional specialization.
If I could just make one other point here, is that it also completely changes when you're talking about third-party management and owner-operators, because third-party management, let's be honest, they're reactive to their owners, their clients. They have to appease them. Now, as they grow and they get bigger, they can make that a competitive advantage, that they have this whole centralized operation and they can be more efficient than others. But to have all their clients on the same page and willing to do the same system is not likely.
Well, we are third-party managers, actually. So you're right,
okay,
though. It is a massive challenge. But again, to what I'm saying is why this can be so flexible is that it doesn't have to be exactly the same across the board. You can scale things up. So let's say one owner has a preference to have really super high-end, super high-touch client resident experience. You can staff and build a model that works for that property or that portfolio of properties in a way within the same operational specialization model as you can with another owner who wants to be as cost efficient as possible, doesn't really care as much about the resident experience. Now, yeah, is that difficult to do? It can be, again, but it's totally flexible and scalable to be able to operate that way. So, that's why
Moshe,
we found this to be the most interesting. Yeah. Sorry, Dan. Yeah, I know if we got
No. I'm about to pivot us to another exciting topic, but I want to make sure, Moshe, do you have any follow up to that?
Do I have any follow up to that? We can talk about this recording before the recording, if what we're allowed to talk about, what we're not allowed to talk about. But I think at the end of the day, it has to do with the performance of the property. And ironic, and I mean, 2023 for some of our investments was the best year in terms of return on investment, and we're talking about it in a year in a market when rents were down. It's just because we've been laser focused on our operational efficiency, and it's been working. So we could talk about models, functionally that they're working, but at the end of the day, we're a for-profit business, and everybody here, or I think everybody here is for profit. So, looking at what properties perform and how they perform.
Let's pivot into resident experience, because I think it touches on what some of the things both of you guys are talking about. Right. And when it comes to centralization, I feel like resident experience is a pretty big one. How can centralization impact the level of that personalized service and that personalized experience that residents receive? Mike, you were kind of touching on this, and I think, Moshe, this is important too when it comes to your properties and your portfolio. Are there trade-offs when we're thinking about centralization for the resident, like pros and cons? What are you both seeing? Mike, let's start with you.
I think Moshe made a couple of good points earlier when he talked about this way of a lot of firms, especially some of the bigger ones, are thinking about centralization, setting up a call center that's going to handle sort of requests or leasing inquiries, and they're trying to pull everyone out of the property. And so I think, yeah, there is a real, or implementing virtual leasing, all this sort of technology first centralization can really drive to the bottom in terms of resident experience, and that's not what I'm advocating for at all. I think where this specialization and it comes into play really is in the roles you're carving out. So instead of having an assistant property manager, as a jack of all trades that's trying to just support a property manager who's also a jack of all trades in a lot of ways, what I'm saying is you're carving those two things into separate, to drive at separate outcomes. Like, for example, the outcome of the resident services manager, they have a scorecard that's based on what is the resident experience. They're tasked with making sure the residents are happy, have a great experience, all the things that are important to resident outcome. And so having a role that's specifically oriented around driving an outcome specific to the resident experience can allow you to do things and drive and create better resident outcomes. So, but yeah, there's a whole lot of downside potentially of just this tech first centralization that I think we've probably all seen.
Moshe, I think you're on a little bit of a delay, but let us know what you think about that.
Yeah, sorry, some of it was a little choppy for me, so I didn't get everything. But yes, I mean, residents want responsiveness. And so, the typical model is you have an on-site staff and a resident needs something and they can't get a hold of somebody, or they're not there, or the office is bombarded by prospects or residents, whatever it might be, and they can't get in touch with people. So responsiveness, they want to know that their work order has been received. They want to know that it's being tended to. And so there's a lot of things that I think in terms of being efficient. Again, some of that stuff doesn't need a human in order to create that responsiveness. A huge part of it, by the way, is just educating the resident, whatever your platform, whatever your way of responding to residents is also training them, because you could have this online portal or a platform and they're going to call the office anyways, or they're going to come into the office anyways. And so there's an educational piece. But yes, the number one thing I think in terms of customer service is an element of responsiveness and knowing that whatever it is that they need is heard and is being tended to. I tend to be more people centric and believe that people are not going to be completely replaced in this industry. People like, I was at a conference on Monday here in Baltimore, and someone was talking about how their self-guided tours convert higher than their guided tours. And I don't know if that self-guided tours are so great or that their leasing is really, really rough. Leasing is not rocket science, but it is a science. And I mean, you think of any other sales, you typically want a person who's doing the sales. And most people, when you look at the data, the number one source for leads are phone calls, and everything is online, and everything they need, they can schedule, they can apply, everything can be done online. But why do they call? I think subconsciously because they want to determine if that's a place that is going to take care of them. Is that a place that cares and that comes through with your people? So that's why I think on-site staff is essential to that experience. Will there be people who don't want to talk to anybody? Yes, you can have, a residence for introverts that don't want to talk to anybody. Is there a place for that? Yes. But is that going to be the mainstream? Is that going to be everywhere? No, I think it's more of a niche versus being the rule.
Yeah, that really dovetails in really nicely to this next topic, which is the centralized model and providing the level of flexibility that you would probably get more so with an on-site team, a very people-forward on-site team. Nowadays, we're hearing about models where there's no one on site and everything is online. Everything's email, call, form, to your point, Moshe. Can a centralized model provide that same level of flexibility, do you think, or is it always going to be sort of a little bit of quote-unquote centralization blended with like the people-first approach on site?
I think that model is totally wrong to kind of go totally tech virtual non-on-site staff type of thing forward all the time. I think exactly to Moshe's point, I think we agree on this totally. This is a people business. Frankly, I think there's more and more people than ever that really want that sense of connection with other people that can help them make decisions. So someone that can help guide them to choosing their apartment, right? It's a big decision for someone. So they want someone that can help explain and talk them through the pros and cons of an apartment, what if it's a great fit for them, or frankly, if it's not. And that's what a good leasing person does. And similarly, like when home is such a high important need for every person, if you talk about sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs or things like that, we're talking about something that is so critically important to people, where they live and how their home is running and operating. So that's why that responsiveness is so critical. And yeah, as good as sort of AI is going to get and the tools we can incorporate, and I think there are a lot of tools that you can incorporate to actually be more responsive. But at the end of the day, if they don't have faith and confidence and feel like someone is caring about them and delivering a hospitality type of experience of what someone is helping and do for them, not just doing to a building or doing to them, but what they're doing for them, that is such a critical piece of the puzzle to buildings that are going to operate better in the long term. I think you're going to see a lot of these buildings that are in properties that are going to really that are scaling back on their service level are going to suffer financially, certainly over time, if not in the near future. But so that's why it's critical. And that's why we've designed and are continuing to evolve our system to have that specialized role that is focused entirely on the resident experience. And that's people first resident experience.
Moshe, what do you think about that?
Sorry, what was the question that started this?
Yeah, it's kind of teasing out and understanding how the sort of the centralized model can and cannot work necessarily very effectively in terms of the resident experience on site. We've been hearing about all these groups that are actually taking everyone off site, everything's technology focused, and the sort of that personal touch is gone. I think Mike's sort of arguing for the opposite with the centralized model that he's been talking about during the debate. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I mean, if and again, everybody. So depending on the size of a company and what they're capable of doing. But imagine, let's just say you have your regular model of on-site team, and you have somebody at corporate who is calling every single move-in and checking in with them to see how it was and to give some sort of rating and address anything that might, to me, I think that would be fantastic. Is everybody, have the budget to do that? Not necessarily. Are there ways to make room for that? I think so. And that kind of thing should be, I think, a priority. So yeah, people want to know that if something's going to go wrong, because there's always going to be something to go wrong, that somebody's going to take care of it and somebody cares. And the littlest thing tells the person that, right? Maintenance guys, gals, the maintenance team having a uniform and looking sharp tells you something, right? If you don't take care of them, they look like a mess. Like, what does that tell you they're going to do in terms of taking care of your home?
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think, and this is where this idea of having specialized functional roles and functional leadership within various leadership within the functional roles. So like even on the example you used with maintenance, instead of having to be coaching and training maintenance, once a year when they go to a summit or a seminar, you can do that on a much more regular basis. Make sure they're all operating the same way. Make sure they got the uniforms on every day. Make sure they're clocking in, clocking out the same way, because you're having them report up, not to the property specifically, but cross-functionally to the maintenance group, who's then scored and have a scorecard based on their performance, resident reviews, utilization, all these things that can drive efficiency in a property, as well as a great resident experience. And so that's the benefit here of really driving this, operationally within their functions to serve residents better and to deliver a more efficient performance across the property or portfolio. I'm actually a little bit curious, Moshe, on your take on have you guys, in terms of sort of some of the technology you guys have implemented to help? It sounds like, again, I think everyone in the industry is sort of trying to move to be more efficient in a way and trying to be a little bit more effective. Everyone says they care about resident experience. Obviously, I think, frankly, the resident experience, expectations are growing almost exponentially all the time as well, which makes this more and more difficult. But what are you guys doing in terms of providing tools and resources, whether centralized or not, to your teams to be able to, provide a great experience technology wise or otherwise?
Wait, did this just turn into an interview from a debate?
Welcome. This is an interview.
No,
Welcome.
Much. I honestly was thinking about it as it relates to centralization. One of the points I think that Chris raised a little bit earlier, or we had talked about ahead of time, was just how tech enhances the ability to deliver a more efficient or centralized, quote unquote, word we both hate, say it again, a more efficient service level. So are there things that you guys have seen that help the way you guys operate?
An approach that we take is wherever there's potential friction or unnecessary friction that you can remove, and the easier way it is to remove it. So, there's a few different platforms that do this, but the move-in process can be very cumbersome. You have to make sure that the water's in their name, or sorry, maybe not the water, but the electric. They have to have insurance. There's a lot of things that have to be checked, and that process can be very painful. And there's a few different platforms and different options where it can streamline that process, and it's almost like a workflow for the resident to go through. Like, this is what you need to do, and then someone on our team just has to look in to see that it's been completed versus chasing them and verifying and checking. So that seems like a very easy thing. You remove friction. These things don't have to be done by a human. Creating a workflow for the resident to make their move-in smoother and more seamless is something that we have implemented and looking to, I guess, take to the next step.
Yeah. No, it makes it that way. I think what I say is we're sort of really pretty cautious about how we're trying to implement new tech and prop techs. I think a lot of it is, offering features and searches of a problem in a lot of cases, and that residents may not have, and just another tool for a property team to learn. And I think, it's even more difficult to implement these types of tools, even the good ones, frankly, across various sites and properties with different managers who are kind of, operating all a little bit differently, even in the best cases at property and on site. So it's a little bit easier to implement good prop tech when you have the teams, again, operating within these functions. So the same functions doing things very similar across the board can implement the same technology in a way that works and better integrate some of these tools and technology. That's why I was just kind of curious. I'm not here to sort of plug anything specifically at all by any means, but I just think most of the prop tech adds actually more friction than it solves. And I think one of the challenges and dangers and pitfalls of trying to do centralization, so to speak, is just relying too much on the tools and technology and software instead of focusing on people, resident experience, and employee experience specifically.
Well, can I take a moment to say something? Sorry.
Of course.
Yes. While you're here. Yeah.
Seth Godin has this great little rant that's, why are fire trucks always shiny? Because when the firemen have nothing else to do, they wash the truck. But washing the truck doesn't put out fires, and it doesn't prevent fires. And a lot of, in corporate America, in multifamily, we have people who are looking to do things which are shiny, but it doesn't affect the bottom line necessarily. So if any company that's making a hypothesis that this is the model, or this is the way to go, you're not going to have results within a month, or you're going to forever. So it's too early. But if a company does their research and they make their hypothesis and this is where they're going, it could be working in the short term, but nobody's going to know if it's going to work in the long term or not. And each company has to decide and hedge their bets. It's thinking in bets, right? Where are you willing to put your money? But I think it's too early for anybody, unless they've been doing something like this for years on end. And I would be very curious on that front. But it's too early to say that this is the way or that's the way. There's a lot of shiny stuff. There's a lot of stuff that looks good versus what is actually good.
Yes. I think that's a great point. And I think it's a great segue into thanking you guys, because we're already over 45 minutes into this. This stuff goes so freaking fast. I really appreciate your insights on this. Before we jump into audience questions, I want to remind everyone you can win some stuff today. So win. Take a look at this. We want your feedback. We want to make transforming cities better, continue to improve it. for all in the multifamily space. So give us your feedback. We're going to give away Amazon gift cards, TC swag. We're going to pick 3 winners at random tonight is the deadline. So please follow the link in the comments. Give us some feedback. We'd love to hear it. As we move forward, let's go ahead and answer some audience questions. I actually saw a couple over here I wanted to hit on really quick, if you guys don't mind. One was, how do you... Yep.
I can't see
Go
who's
ahead.
here, so if there's anybody that came, thank you for coming. I have no idea
Yes.
who's here, who's not here, how many people are here. Thank you for
This
those
is
that
actually
came.
just the 3 of us. This is just the 3 of us, Moshe.
Okay.
This is all the dry
Great.
run. No, we have a great audience. There's been a lot of amazing participation, so thank you everyone for being a part of it. One of the questions was, how do you bridge the gap of promotional growth? And I think this ties back to some of the earlier convos, since a leasing professional shouldn't technically go from leasing to property manager, with the idea of centralizing the APM role. Mike, maybe you can kick us off there.
Yeah, I think we definitely touched on this a little bit earlier, but that I think there are many roles within any of the functions, leasing being one of them, as you continue to grow and scale. And look, in any organization, in any company, in any business line in America, the sort of org chart gets smaller as you go up, right? So there's not unlimited positions for every person to move up in every role in every function. I think let's not fool ourselves there. But like the best leasing people, as they move up to leasing manager, and as the best leasing managers move up to leasing director, and then they become part of our sales and marketing leadership, right? And so, or they can also, in theory, move in. A leasing person can move cross-functionally into a property manager role, or portfolio manager, or regional manager type of role. There's nothing that says they can't do that. The question is, are they the right fit for that seat at the right time? And frankly, the other thing, just to add to this, I think one of the biggest challenges within the business is the fact that we're treating leasing like an entry level position. And so I'm not to Moshe's point, I'm not saying you can't have someone enter the business as in leasing that's the right fit as an entry level job, but we're treating it across the industry as entry level, whereas instead of giving it the focus it should deserve as literally driving half of the equation in terms of revenue across portfolios. So this industry has very much traditionally been focused on controlling expenses, operational efficiency, and all those things are great, but there's been just a dramatic underinvestment in, frankly, marketing and leasing that are the things that drive revenue, right? And revenue is a big part of the coin, and frankly, the other side of that, half of it is deriving resident experience, so that they're getting value from the rent and the revenue they're paying. But again, I just think there's so many opportunities to improve the way we do leasing in this business and marketing in this business that can help the performance of properties in a dramatic way. And I think that has to start with thinking about leasing as this entry level position to move up to assistant property manager and property manager. And that's, again, I think the crux of this whole debate, how it came about.
Mm-hmm.
Do I go now?
Go for it.
So, I think that, the best property managers, and that was the post that started this, the best property managers were assistant managers first, and they started in leasing. And there's, I think, an advantage of taking a holistic approach to this business. And those that, when you leasing, it is a sales position, but you don't necessarily want the best salesperson. You could have a very good salesperson and someone who's going to move up and be an assistant manager and be a property manager, and they're going to be a fantastic property manager or a fantastic regional manager. Like I think an advantage for me is I've spent a fair amount of time on site and continue to do, even though I'm in a corporate position, because there's a lot that's gained by spending that time on site. And there's a lot of people who are making these decisions who don't spend any time on site, or they're very disconnected from that. And so having people who have been through, I was at a marketing conference, Multifamily Marketing East here in Baltimore on Monday, and I was on a panel and asked a question like, how many people in the room started on site or started leasing? And it was 85% of the room. And I would imagine that some of these marketers, they're better because they did spend time on site and they do have a better feel for the business I think everybody should be an expert at the business. It's amazing. I think it's fascinating how many property managers, even regional managers, don't understand the financials of this business. They don't understand, cost per door. They don't understand cap rate. Like, they'll say these things, but they don't actually know. They have no idea what the property sold for, what it can sell for, the value of the property. Everybody should be very savvy when it comes to the financials and understanding this business, because it's a great business, and the more you understand it, it's going to impact your decision making. People will say things and do things. Like, when I started investing, and I got the opportunity to invest in real estate, it changed everything for me. Like, I didn't just think like an owner. Everybody should be thinking like an owner.
Oh, and Moshe, I think you raise a really important point that I think too many managers and people in all kinds of roles don't really understand the fundamentals of the multifamily business, investing and ownership. I 100% agree. But this is one of the problems I think we solve by thinking about it in a functional way, because you're making sure the people, because you're getting away from this idea that managers have to be a jack of all trades. And so they oftentimes are just trying to like put out fires all the time, and they don't have time or ability to think about those types of things or learn those types of things, because they're stuck kind of going from, accounting to dealing with a resident thing to getting maintenance set up, to do a lease. It's just there's too many things going on that are causing the scatterbrain. They don't have time to invest in themselves or do training or understand the sort of how to properly even plan a budget in a more effective way. So that's what we're trying to solve here with this idea of functional specialization.
I think that's an ownership of I think that's on the employer and on ownership to train them and to teach them. I mean, we do quarterly workshops, and we're teaching people on the team. When I was director of leasing, I would have these weekly calls, and we have certain stats that we had to go through, but I tried to do that really quickly. And the rest of the time was like, what can I educate them? And teach them about this business and create a desire. People want to grow and get better. And some people want to elevate in their position. Some people are happy with where they are, but nobody wants to just be stagnant and do the same thing. They want to be growing in some capacity. And I think that's on the employer to further that education and further that. We started an internship program, and I think I try to create the program what I would want as an intern. And we expose them to a lot. We bring them into meetings with acquisitions, with our development team. Like, we're exposing them to a tremendous lot. We're trying to whet their appetite and give them an experience they wouldn't get anywhere else. And that's what I think all employers should do for their teams. Like, how can I give them the more we invest in them and educate them, one, the better they're going to probably perform, and two, so what's the worst that can happen? They're going to go somewhere else, and they're going to see it's not as good, and they're going to want to come back.
No, so 100%. Those are all absolutely. If a company, a firm isn't investing in training like that or things like that can help boost the career, then they probably shouldn't be in business, right? So I totally agree with that, and that makes sense to do that training. What I'm saying though is taking the training, and then how are you operationalizing that? Because the teams don't really have time. They can go through a training, hear it, a few times, but they're not ever really be able to dive deeper into a certain function to really drive that and learn that. And so the specific things. And so all I'm sort of arguing, or not arguing, I only am arguing for it, is just by creating the specialization of functions, you're able to get people deeper into the specifics of any given thing and really put into action the things they're learning in a more concentrated manner than just having this wide sort of surface level knowledge. And that's where we think that this is why this type of setup and org structure works better, at least for us. Again, not for everybody, and we don't by any means have all the answers. This is a messy, difficult, challenging business across the board. And I often like to compare it to sausage making. Hopefully you get a good sausage at the end, but it's a challenge, right? And so we're just trying to find the best way to operate as effectively as possible and deliver a great career experience and resident experience and get better, 1% better every day, so to speak.
Wait, so Moshe, do you make sausages? Way over my head. Do you make sausages, or are you in multifamily? Okay. Okay, guys, I think that's it for us. I think that hit the bell is tolling now for us to wrap this up. Just under an hour. Thank you again, Moshe and Mike, for doing this today. I think it's been a good conversation. We had a lot of great engagement. I encourage you both to hop into the thread afterwards. We're gonna do the poll. Yeah, we're gonna do the poll live on the event page. So please go hop over there, answer any questions, and appreciate you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Moshe. That was fantastic. Good conversation.